He tried to destroy my reputation in front of everyone. They laughed when I walked out of that boardroom. They thought slamming a report at me would shut me up. But I didn't raise my voice. I raised the evidence. And when the screen lit up, their careers went dark. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The glass boardroom at Ellery Financial shimmered under the fluorescent grid above. Each panel reflected a distorted version of us, faces multiplied, sharp suits doubled, ambition scattered like fractured light. The air smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and burnt coffee drifting up from the break room below. Minneapolis winters had a way of sneaking through every vent and seam, but that morning the tension in the room was thick enough to burn through frost. You could hear everything: the gentle click of heels, the scrape of a chair leg shifting a few inches back, the soft whir of the projector fan, even the quiet inhale before someone spoke. Q4 review day did that to people. It compressed the whole year into a single room, a single table, a single judgment. I had my section ready, projected, timed, synced to the second. Numbers aligned, visuals clean, transitions fluid. I'd practiced it the night before until my reflection mouthed the words back at me. By now, it lived in my pulse. I didn't speak unless it was my turn. Silence, when handled right, commands a room better than volume ever could. We were 27 minutes in. My heart was steady, but my fingers felt cold around the tablet. I pushed my chair back, stood, and walked toward the front. The sound of my heels against the tile was the only rhythm in the room. That's when it happened. Thud. A thick report hit my chest, hard enough to make me take a half step back. The weight of it surprised me more than the pain. Binder clipped, red tabs sticking out like open wounds. My name scrawled across the cover in heavy pen strokes, slanted, impatient, angry. Jake's voice sliced through the stillness. Maybe try doing your job for once. For a second, nobody moved. It was as if every molecule of air paused to listen. Mr. Granger, our VP, jerked so fast his mug nearly toppled. The coffee rippled, dark circles spreading in slow motion before settling again. I didn't move, didn't blink. My pulse slowed instead of racing. I lowered the report onto the table, flat, deliberate, aligning its edge with the wood grain. Then I tapped once on my tablet screen. The projector blinked, hesitated, then filled the frosted glass wall behind me with a pale blue glow. Jake shifted in his chair. His jaw flexed once. He didn't know it yet, but he had just handed me my cue. But let me go back. 3 months earlier, I had been sinking in a silence no one else could hear. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't show in your face until one morning you look in the mirror and realize it's been there for weeks. It wasn't just work pressure. It was the slow corrosion of trust. It began with whispers, tiny ones that slid between emails and meetings, reports I supposedly missed, tasks that vanished before I could finish them, client calls I forgot to join even though the invites never arrived. Every mistake traced back to me, but the evidence never did. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was stretched too thin, maybe the system glitched, maybe it was chance. But patterns don't lie. The same name surfaced each time, like oil on water. Jake. Jake had charm, the performative kind. He filled space with it. Talked fast, laughed loudly. Always had the right joke ready when Mr. Granger needed a laugh. He was the kind of man people liked before they learned better. Me? I had credentials, a degree earned through night classes, a resume built from years of small, thankless promotions. I didn't network over whiskey, I just worked. For a while, it didn't matter. Numbers spoke for me. My reports landed clean, my analyses got praise. Then Jake started breathing my oxygen. Ideas I mentioned in passing turned up in his decks. My charts, my layouts, even the phrasing of my slides, lifted whole. The first time, I told myself it was coincidence. The second, I wasn't sure. The third time, I knew. When I raised it quietly, HR smiled the way people do when they've already chosen sides. "We'll look into it," Mr. Granger added. "He's a rising star, Claire. Maybe you two just need to collaborate better." I stopped talking. and started watching. I built a folder on a private drive, hidden under the label of an old training file. Inside it, I stored everything: screenshots, time-stamped submissions, version histories. I learned how metadata could be a weapon. Every edit, every upload, every login, proof carved in code. Then I went further. I requested access to our boardroom security archive, citing a compliance test I'd volunteered to run. It was approved without a question. I wasn't angry yet. I was collecting the truth one quiet click at a time. Jake mistook my silence for weakness. That was his first mistake. He became bolder, reckless even. He forgot to CC me on team chains. He told interns to route drafts through him first. He rehearsed his jokes about me so often they came out smooth. Claire's too meticulous. Claire's a perfectionist. Claire slows us down. They laughed with him, some nervously, some eagerly. I watched. I listened. I archived. By December, my drive held a full narrative: emails, server logs, audio snippets from open meetings, even footage of him borrowing my flash drive one afternoon when he thought no one was watching. And still, I waited, because revenge without timing is just noise. When Q4 review day came, he arrived early, too early. He was humming when I walked in, arranging his papers, adjusting the lighting. He greeted me like nothing was wrong. That was the thing about men like Jake. They believed confidence could erase consequence. I took my seat, my slides loaded perfectly. The meeting began. 27 minutes later, his patience broke before mine did. The report hit my chest, and my plan unfolded. The first slide behind me appeared, white letters over a steel blue background. Board evidence, restricted access. Case ID Jacques 322-4A. I didn't need to speak. The title did it for me. Then the next slide clicked on. An email chain. His words, not mine. Him instructing another analyst to submit my report under his name. He'd deleted it from the shared drive, but not before it synced with my archive. Slide 3, server logs. My time-stamped submission 36 hours early. His late upload, his complaint blaming my delay. Slide 4, footage from this very room. Jake bending over my desk after hours, USB in hand, looking around, sliding it into his pocket. The sound in the room changed. You could hear the hum of the lights, the breath someone held too long, the faint creak of leather as Mr. Granger leaned forward. Jake's leg bounced under the table. His throat worked as he swallowed. He knew the order of evidence meant I'd planned this. I turned toward Mr. Granger. He didn't look away. Jake spoke first, voice breaking just a little. "This is—" "Claire, come on, this is out of context." I met his eyes. "Then explain it." He stood so fast his chair shrieked against the floor. Mr. Granger's voice came low, firm. "Sit down, Jake." Silence followed, heavy, absolute. Then, "Security. Now." The word landed like a verdict. Jake's color drained. His lips parted, but nothing came out. HR's representative, Marcia, rose from the back. She pressed a button on her headset, murmured into the mic. Her gaze never left him. I didn't move, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. The victory wasn't in the spectacle, it was in the control. He thought slamming a report at me would break me. He didn't know he'd just turned it into Exhibit A. He didn't speak as security entered. He just stared at the carpet like it might somehow open up and swallow him whole. The beige weave beneath his shoes looked suddenly infinite, every thread stretching downward into the kind of void he couldn't talk his way out of. The two guards moved quietly, practiced in their restraint. They didn't need to say a word. One positioned himself near the door, wide stance, neutral face. The other stepped closer, a single hand raised in a calm gesture. Their composure made the tension louder. Jake blinked twice, jaw tightening, breath catching like it couldn't find rhythm. His eyes darted between them, then toward Mr. Granger, then finally to me, searching for someone to save him, someone to believe his story. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "She's twisting—" Granger didn't flinch. His voice came out measured, the tone of a man who'd already weighed the cost. "Take your laptop. You'll be escorted to HR. Do not log into any company systems. The scrape of chair legs broke the air. Jake stood, movement jerky, uneven. His hand trembled as he reached for the laptop. He closed it with a soft click, but the sound felt final, like the end of a long lie collapsing into itself. He started for the door, then hesitated, turned just enough to face me. His face was pale, his mouth a tight line fighting to stay steady. "You're not better than me, Claire." I didn't raise my voice. "You're right," I said. "I'm just not you." The words landed softer than I expected, but they carried more weight than any shout. He blinked once, then walked out. The door shut with a clean metallic click that echoed through the boardroom and left behind an unnatural stillness. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hum of the overhead lights filled the silence. Someone shifted a pen. Someone else coughed into a sleeve. It felt like the entire building exhaled and didn't know what to do next. Mr. Granger finally spoke, his tone flat but polite. "You may continue your presentation." And I did. My fingers moved automatically, my voice steady, clear. Slide after slide. Numbers, charts, projections. The same rhythm I'd rehearsed. But while my mouth formed sentences about quarterly metrics and client growth, my mind drifted. Not to Jake, not to the humiliation he'd just earned, but to the weeks I'd sat in this very room feeling invisible. There was one meeting I couldn't forget. Early September. The air conditioner had died that morning. The entire team fanned themselves with folders, beads of sweat forming at the edges of perfectly applied makeup and pressed collars. The projector kept flickering between blue and black. Everyone was irritable, impatient. I had printed a report myself, a small detail that seemed ridiculous now, and placed it neatly at Jake's seat while he scrolled through his phone. He took it, didn't look at me, didn't say thank you. He just stood, walked it to Mr. Granger, and said, "Here's the report I compiled." No one blinked. No one corrected him. I remember gripping my pen so hard it left a small indentation in my palm. I smiled at nothing, eyes on my notepad, pretending to write something important. The room moved on. That night, I drove home under a low gray sky, wipers dragging across a thin drizzle that blurred the city lights into smeared halos. Minneapolis felt colder than usual. I stopped at a speedway on 11th, filled my tank, then bought a bag of cheddar popcorn I didn't even want. I sat there with the engine off, the heat still ticking from the vents, staring at the empty parking lot while the rain whispered against the windshield. I ate one piece at a time, not tasting it, just chewing because it filled. The silence. It wasn't just about the report. It was about erasure. The slow, invisible kind. The kind that makes you question your own reflection. My ideas were too sharp. My tone too controlled. My laugh didn't rise at the right punchlines. Maybe my presence was too quiet for rooms like this. Jake knew how to be seen. He filled air like perfume, loud, sweet, temporary. He made people feel important when they stood near him. I made them uncomfortable because I noticed what they didn't want noticed. I saw how the timestamps never aligned on the shared tracker, how font sizes changed slightly when he edited fake slides into my reports, how his group edits turned into solo presentations, how the compliments he gave were really rehearsed rehearsals for his next theft. So, I documented. Not out of vengeance, but survival. Each screenshot, each log, each recorded timestamp was a lifeline. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't beg. I collected, like a quiet archivist of sabotage. That day in the boardroom, when the report slammed against my chest, wasn't impulsive. It was the conclusion of months of quiet work. Every humiliation stored, every whisper cataloged. My reaction wasn't instinct. It was design. After the meeting ended, the applause for the rest of the presentation felt oddly hollow, like background noise from a different life. I walked back to my desk, my heels clicking down the corridor, and the smell of fresh toner from the printer room hit me halfway down the hall. The office looked the same: white walls, gray carpet, faint hum of fluorescent bulbs. But everything felt lighter, like a pressure had lifted. There was an envelope waiting on my desk. HR letterhead. My name typed neatly in bold. I opened it slowly. Inside was a formal apology from the department. "We have reopened prior inquiries," it read. "An internal review of management oversight will be conducted immediately." I read it twice, then folded it once, cleanly, and slid it into the top drawer of my desk. I didn't smile, didn't sigh. There was no triumph in ink on paper. What I wanted wasn't acknowledgement. It was truth that stayed visible even after the lights dimmed. By Wednesday, whispers started moving through the building again, but this time they weren't about me. Jake's badge had been deactivated, his name removed from team threads. One of the interns stopped me in the hallway, wide-eyed, eager to spill what everyone already suspected. HR found evidence he'd been logging in under other employees' names, using shared workstations late at night. The server logs matched my archives exactly. I never asked for details. I didn't need to. Truth has a scent. Once released, it lingers. It seeps into conversation, into glances, into how people say your name differently. That Friday, just before lunch, Mr. Granger appeared at my office door. He wasn't holding a coffee mug this time. His tie was slightly loose, his phone in one hand. He looked older, heavier somehow, like the week had aged him. "Claire," he said, leaning against the frame, "I owe you an apology, and a thank you." I nodded once, measured. "Is there something you need from me?" "Only if you're open to joining the new ethics task force," he said. "We're rebuilding some of our systems. I need someone who doesn't flinch." I looked at him for a moment, weighing the irony of it all. The same man who once told me to collaborate better, now asking me to help rewrite the rules. "I'll think about it," I said. He smiled faintly, more out of fatigue than relief. "That's all I can ask." Then he turned and walked away. I sat back in my chair, looked at the same glass wall that once reflected my doubt. Somewhere between the slam of that report and the click of that closing door, I had remembered who I was. A woman who doesn't scream, a woman who doesn't fold, a woman who turns silence into strategy. He thought he embarrassed me. He thought he ended me. He only introduced me. The following Monday, I walked into the building just before 8. The air outside was sharp enough to sting, the kind of cold that made your breath visible for a second before vanishing. The city still wore its winter skin, salt crusted on sidewalks, snow pushed into gray piles near the curbs, streetlights blinking weakly against the pale dawn. My reflection followed me in every glass surface I passed, steady, quiet, unbothered. No makeup, no heels. Just a pair of flat black boots that made no sound against the marble floor, my slate gray coat, and a calm that ran deeper than caffeine ever could. The lobby doors opened with their usual hydraulic sigh, but something about the sound felt different. The air in the building had shifted, not because people had changed, but because I wasn't shrinking anymore. The receptionist looked up from her monitor and gave me a hesitant smile. I nodded back. It wasn't friendliness, it was acknowledgement, the kind that said, "I saw what happened. I won't pretend I didn't." As I walked past the open office area, the low buzz of conversation faded for a few seconds. A few coworkers lifted their eyes. Some smiled, tight-lipped, unsure if it was safe to speak. Some turned away, pretending to be absorbed in spreadsheets or messages. I didn't take it personally. Most hadn't seen Jake for what he was. But some had, and said nothing. The difference now was that I remembered that silence too. It used to ache, now it informed me. The break room smelled of over-roasted beans and burnt toast. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Creamer, no sugar. Habit layered in muscle memory. I stood for a moment by the counter, letting the steam fog my glasses slightly. The window above the sink was still fogged from the night, offering a blurred view of the skyline. I carried my mug back to my desk. My inbox lit up the second I sat down. 37. New threads. The familiar anxiety used to spike whenever I saw that number. Now, I just breathed once and opened the first. 5 messages stood out immediately. Clients. Different names, different signatures, same sentiment. "We're so sorry you had to deal with that. We trust you. We look forward to continuing the partnership." That word, trust, hit harder than I expected. It wasn't earned through spectacle or public defense. It had been earned quietly over years of reliability. Through every early morning, every late report edited alone, every weekend spent fixing someone else's mistake. Marcia from HR pinged me around noon. Her message was short. "You good for a quick check-in?" I typed back, "Sure. 6th floor?" The 6th floor's glass pods were designed for transparency. It always made me laugh, how companies built walls out of glass but still hid everything that mattered. Marcia was already there when I arrived, cross-legged on one of the pale blue chairs, scrolling through her Slack messages. A green smoothie sat beside her, condensation pooling at its base. "Hey," she said without looking up. "You don't have to stay here, you know." "I know," I said. She finally glanced up, eyes searching my face as if she expected to see fatigue, bitterness, maybe even vindication. But all she saw was quiet. Marcia set her smoothie down. "Most people would have left months ago. After being treated like that?" I shrugged lightly. Leaving gives them what they want. Staying lets me rebuild what they tried to erase. Her mouth curved not into a smile, but into something close to respect. "For what it's worth," she said. "I've never seen someone flip a power dynamic like that, quietly but completely." I didn't answer, just adjusted my scarf and turned toward the glass wall. Outside, the Minneapolis skyline shimmered under a brittle winter sun. The Mississippi River cut a frozen vein through the city. Everything looked still, but I could feel the thaw starting beneath the surface. That night, back home, I powered up my laptop and opened the folder that had once been my armor. Jake evidence. Hundreds of files, screenshots, emails, audio clips, backups of backups. Proof of every lie he thought would stay buried. My cursor hovered over it for a long time. Then I dragged it into the trash, clicked empty bin, watched the icon vanish. It wasn't forgiveness, it was release. I no longer needed evidence to prove what I already embodied. The damage he'd tried to inflict had become something else. Foundation, a place to stand taller. By the end of that week, new whispers drifted through the office again. This time, they sounded different, less like gossip, more like confession. 2 employees came forward. Different departments, same story. Jake had manipulated data, shifted blame, taken credit for work that wasn't his. They'd seen what happened in the boardroom, the calm, precision of it, the way silence had turned against him. And suddenly, staying quiet didn't feel safe anymore. One of them was Karina. She worked in data analytics, soft-spoken, always wore those retro gold-rimmed glasses that slipped down her nose when she got excited about a data set. She stopped me in the parking garage that Thursday evening, just as I was unlocking my car. The air was biting cold, our breaths visible in the fluorescent light. "I just wanted to say," she began, voice trembling slightly, "thank you for not letting it slide." I looked at her. "You're welcome, but you could have told someone." Her eyes flickered downward. I was scared. He had everyone fooled, even me, for a while. I nodded once. Didn't respond. Just pressed the key fob and heard the click of my car unlocking. She gave a small, embarrassed smile and walked away. Some people only find their voices after someone else breaks the sound barrier, and if that's what I did, fine. But I didn't do it to inspire anyone. I did it because I was done being erased. 2 weeks after Jake's departure, a company-wide email landed in everyone's inbox. Subject line: Updated auditing and authorship protocols. It was official. Every major client presentation would now include digital authorship logs, version history tracking, and time-stamped approvals. No more back-channel edits. No more stolen credit. They called it the Claire Protocol. I didn't ask for that name, didn't even smile when I saw it printed on the new compliance slides. But something shifted deep inside me, a quiet pride that didn't need applause. The following Monday, I opened my closet and paused before dressing for work. For the first time in months, I reached for color. A dusty rose blazer, a cream sweater, navy heels. Small choices, maybe, but they felt like reclamation. At meetings, I started holding eye contact longer. I stopped softening my statements into questions. I let silence land after I spoke and watched how others filled it, with agreement, with hesitation, with recognition. That's the thing about being disrespected publicly. When you survive it, you realize how little their approval ever mattered. Jake was gone, but the impression he tried to leave behind, the shadow of his noise, was fading fast. I erased it every time I presented, every time I signed a document with my own name, every time a client requested me directly instead of the team. Not a shadow, not a footnote, not his assistant. I was the reason the Glass Boardroom finally reflected something real. By early March, Minneapolis began to thaw. The streets ran with melting snow, and the air carried that faint metallic smell of wet concrete and promise. I'd walk home some evenings instead of driving, gloves in pocket, hair loose, watching the ice on the river break apart piece by piece. Spring didn't feel like a new season. It felt like a mirror. I saw myself in that slow melt, emerging, certain, unshaken, from frozen silence to fire, from victim to witness, from witness to architect. It wasn't overnight. None of it was. The change didn't announce itself. It crept in quietly, like the slow thaw of snow in spring, melting from the edges first, before you realize the ice is gone. 3 months after Jake had been escorted out of the boardroom, I found myself sitting in the exact same chair again. Same glass walls, same reflection of the skyline, same faint hum of the air system above. But this time, I wasn't defending myself. I was leading the Q1 strategy meeting. My name was printed on the agenda. My initials were in the corner of the deck. My voice, steady and calm, was the first one to fill the room. I remember the small things first, the click of the projector warming up, the subtle sound of the door closing as the last manager took their seat, the faint scratch of pens ready for notes, the smell of fresh coffee, the muted shuffle of tailored sleeves as people turned their pages. My slides opened on the wall behind me, a gradient of deep blue fading into white, clean, confident, mine. As I began to speak, something settled inside me. There was no tremor in my throat, no shallow breath, no glances toward approval. Every eye in that room was focused forward, not because of hierarchy or fear, but because what I was saying mattered. Nobody interrupted. Nobody sighed or rolled their eyes. Nobody waited for a man to translate my words into something credible. The boardroom hadn't changed, but I had. Mr. Granger sat 2 seats to my left, his reading glasses balanced low on his nose as he flipped through the printed notes. The same furrow lived between his brows, but it carried something new: attention, respect, maybe even gratitude. Halfway through my presentation, I paused to take a sip of water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, not from nerves, but from the quiet enormity of the moment. I glanced up, and Granger's eyes met mine. "Take your time," he said. 3 words, simple, but they landed like thunder, because there was a time I had to fight for every second I was allowed to speak. Every pause was an opening for someone else to cut in. Every deep breath was an invitation to be spoken over. But now, silence belonged to me. That's the strange thing about betrayal. It doesn't just show you what people are capable of, it shows you what they think you'll tolerate. I had tolerated too much. Too many jokes disguised as feedback. Too many accidents that weren't accidents at all. Too much silence that I'd mistaken for patience. After the meeting ended, people lingered longer than usual. Some stopped by my chair to compliment a slide, a phrase, an idea. One of the newer analysts asked if I'd mentor her on structuring her next pitch. I gave a small nod, still absorbing how different the air felt when it wasn't laced with doubt. When the room finally cleared, I walked toward the rooftop terrace. The hallway windows glowed with soft afternoon light, pale and cold. The elevator ride up was silent, except for the faint hum of the cables moving. The terrace door groaned open. The air outside was brisk, sharp enough to sting my cheeks. It was barely spring, and the wind still carried winter's edge, but the sun was out, a hard, clean light bouncing off every steel edge in the skyline. I stepped forward and gripped the railing with both hands, letting the chill bite into my skin. The city moved below me, cars gliding through slush, plumes of steam rising from vents, the faint sound of a distant siren fading into nothing. That's when I heard her voice. "We should get lunch sometime." Karina's tone was shy but steady. She stood beside me, coat collar pulled up, hands buried deep in her pockets. The gold rims of her glasses caught the sunlight. "Yeah," I said softly. "We should." She hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "That day," she said, eyes fixed on the skyline, "when he slammed the report, were you scared?" I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't asking for gossip. She was asking for closure, for the version of herself that had stayed quiet when she shouldn't have. "I wasn't scared of him," I said finally. "I was scared of what I'd become if I stayed silent one more time." Her lips pressed together. She nodded once. She didn't need to say anything else. And that silence between us, it wasn't empty. It was shared, earned, heavy with the weight of everything we'd swallowed before and everything we refused to swallow again. A gust of wind swept across the terrace. She tucked her hair behind her ear. I kept my eyes on the horizon where sunlight hit the windows of another tower like sparks. Later that week, I got an email from a university in St. Paul. The subject line read, "Guest Lecture Inquiry." A professor from their business ethics department had heard about the policy changes at Ellery, about the Clare Protocol, and wanted to know if I'd speak to her students. At first I laughed. Me? Standing in front of a classroom giving a lecture? I wasn't an academic. I wasn't polished like that. But then I thought of those students, the interns, the analysts, the assistants who would soon walk into rooms just like mine. Rooms filled with polished confidence and quiet corruption. And I thought, maybe someone should tell them how to survive it. So I said yes. A month later, I stood at the front of a lecture hall. The projector hummed softly, casting light onto a whiteboard. The carpet smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Students trickled in, the air buzzing with that distinct blend of curiosity and fatigue. Some carried laptops. Some had notebooks filled with doodles. A few just leaned back, arms crossed, skeptical but listening. When the professor introduced me, she said, "Today's guest speaker led a quiet revolution in workplace accountability." The word revolution felt too heavy, but I didn't correct her. I took a breath, looked at the faces before me, and I told them about the boardroom, the slam of that report, the stillness that followed, the evidence, the aftermath, the silence that wasn't silence. It was reclamation. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. But there was a moment, a pause, where my throat tightened just enough to remind me I was still human. In that pause, I scanned the room. Rows of faces, girls with highlighters ready, boys in hoodies with skeptical eyes. The hum of the projector filled the space between words. And then I saw her, a girl in the third row, her hand halfway raised, unsure if she was allowed to interrupt. I met her eyes and nodded. She lifted her hand fully. "Did you ever forgive him?" she asked. The room went still. I let the question hang for a moment, felt its echo move through me. Then I said, "No, I didn't need to. He never took anything from me that I couldn't get back." There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. That was the truth. Forgiveness for me wasn't peace. It was permission, and I wasn't giving it. He wanted me to flinch, to fight, to lose control in front of everyone. But I learned something important. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the detonator. He built the stage. I just stepped onto it. And when the lights came on, the truth played louder than his ego ever could. Because some men don't destroy you. They reveal themselves, loudly, publicly, permanently. And when they do, you don't need to scream. You just need to let the truth speak louder than their noise. It was the first Friday of May when the final email came through. The office was half empty, the air still carrying that faint scent of stale coffee and printer ink. The hum of the HVAC filled the silence like white noise. My monitor glowed softly in the dim afternoon light, and there it was, an unread message at the top of my inbox. Subject line, Final HR Review, Case Closed. No attachments, no signature banners, no thank you for your patience. Just 2 lines, black text against a white screen. Following all internal audits, we confirm your claims were accurate. His employment termination is permanently recorded in our system. That was it. I stared at the words for a few seconds. They didn't pulse with satisfaction. They didn't bring a rush of adrenaline. They just settled, like the quiet click of a door closing softly but firmly. I didn't respond, didn't forward it, didn't even flag it. I just let it sit there, not as a trophy, not as proof, but as punctuation. A full stop at the end of a sentence that had once written itself in humiliation and fear. Closure, I realized, isn't loud. It isn't a headline or a final scene with applause. It's silence. It's the absence of needing to prove anything to anyone ever again. The following week, I began cleaning my office. Small things first: extra pens, old drafts, notes scribbled during meetings that no longer mattered. Then, as I turned toward the back of the door, I saw it, the sticky note that had been there for nearly 4 months. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Written in Sharpie, underlined twice. The edges curled slightly from the heat of the room. I peeled it off slowly, feeling the faint tug of the adhesive. For a second, I just held it in my hand. That note had been my armor, a small square of defiance during days when I felt like I was dissolving. I folded it once, neat and deliberate, and slipped it into the front pocket of my wallet. Not as a keepsake of him, but as a reminder of who I became because of what he did. That evening, after a long meeting with compliance about policy updates and digital oversight, I didn't drive straight home. The sky was a bruised shade of purple, heavy with rain, the kind that doesn't pour. It lingers, slow and cold, streaking across your windshield in patient lines. On impulse, I pulled off at an exit in Burnsville and stopped at a small diner tucked between a tire shop and a laundromat. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, half the letters flickering. Inside, the warmth hit instantly: coffee, grease, lemon cleaner, and the faint sweetness of pie crust. The waitress looked up from behind the counter. "Table or booth?" "Booth," I said. She nodded toward one in the corner, red vinyl, a little cracked at the seams, the kind of seat that remembers everyone who's ever leaned into it. I ordered meatloaf and coffee. She brought it within minutes, steam rising, ketchup glaze catching the light. The coffee came in a chipped white mug that said, "Best Dad Ever," probably donated from a yard sale years ago. A man at the counter muttered something about the Twins game. The waitress topped off his mug without asking. Someone laughed softly from the far booth. The rain outside tapped rhythmically against the glass, steady, unhurried. I sat there, fork in hand, watching the water drip from the awning and trail down the window in thin silver lines. Everything felt still, so painfully ordinary. And for the first time in months, my shoulders dropped. My breathing evened out. It wasn't victory I felt. It was release, the kind that comes when the fight is over and the world doesn't need to know you won. Justice hadn't been served for me. I had served it myself. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but thoroughly. That's the part no one tells you about revenge. It doesn't always roar. It doesn't always come with slammed doors or shouted truths. Sometimes it whispers, through a flicker of light on a projector screen, through the soft click of a slideshow advancing, through the quiet patience of a folder labeled Board Evidence, Restricted. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a gray coat, standing in the same glass room she was once humiliated in, only now no one dares interrupt her. He had slammed a report against my chest to embarrass me, so I opened a file that erased him. And sitting there in that diner, surrounded by strangers who didn't know my name, I realized something simple. Revenge isn't about hurting them back. It's about reclaiming the version of yourself they thought they could erase. The waitress came by again. "Refill?" I smiled. "Yeah, why not?" She poured until the mug was full again. I watched the steam rise, watched the raindrops chase each other down the glass, watched the reflection of a woman who no longer looked like she was surviving anything. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.